Here's a rundown of the key points from Quiz 3. So, who are the Helots? Well, the Helots are the serfs of the Spartan system and greatly outnumber the Spartans because the term Spartans only refers to the homoioi, the actual warrior elite. The Spartans have created a system in which equality amongst the citizens is accomplished by reducing the idea of citizenship only to the noble class, the warriors themselves. But within that, they do actually create an idea of equality. This is absolutely dependent upon the utter dedication of the homoioi to the warrior lifestyle, to the exclusion of all other things. In the ancient world, most people spend their time farming, and the Spartans can't do this. And so, in order to make this possible, they are utterly dependent upon the Helots. The Helots farm, so the Spartans do not have to. That's the bumper sticker version. The Helots farm, so the Spartans do not have to. Instead, what happens is the Helots are producing the agricultural goods of the Spartan community, and they turn over a portion of this to a specific family amongst the homoioi. They keep the rest. And so they are serfs tied to the land. They're not owned by individuals, but by the Spartan state. The Helots come from the original inhabitants of Laconia and Messenia, the lands that the Spartans conquer. Remember, the Spartans are part of the Dorian invasion at the very end of the Bronze Age. And so this new wave of Greeks comes down into the western part of the Aegean world. The Spartans amongst them settle in the southern Peloponnese and take over that territory and conquer and essentially enslave the original inhabitants, the Laconians and the Messenians, and they become essentially prisoners of war. And this is etymologically what Helots is thought to imply. They're certainly treated this way. The hostility is perennial because the Helots so outnumber the Spartans that there's a constant risk of uprising. And so the Spartans use the suppression of the Helots to increase the mastery of their warrior skills as student warriors and into their adulthood. But without the Helots, the Spartan system cannot exist, because in order for the Spartans to dedicate their lives to war, someone else has to do the farming. What was the Aguegae? Okay, so the Aguegae is the training system of the Spartans. This is a process of bringing Spartan boys into the military system and training them to identify with the other warriors. This is about building identity, about building loyalty, about reinforcing the idea that to be a true Spartan is to be an ideal warrior. And this is reinforced through not only this mass connection where they all eat in the mess and they all live in the barracks, they live apart from their families, but also through individual bonding where older students take on a protege amongst the younger students and create a personal, intimate bond with them in order to have this connection across each age group and bring them forward individually from one kind of understanding into the next, from an identity as a boy into an identity as a teenager into an identity as a Spartan warrior. This means the Spartan society does not change because, they're already attaining the ideal. They're already have this baseline of what it is that a Spartan is supposed to be, and this is indoctrinated into every generation over and over, so that there's no other way of thinking. There's no possibility of seeing oneself in any other way, and this ensures the absolute unshakability of the Spartan warrior ethos, as well as the training in how to actually be an effective and strong warrior. So in the excerpt for the reader, the Aristotle, we'll talk more about Aristotle later. Aristotle is interested in comparing political systems and seeing which is the most effective. And so he's looking at the things that are vulnerable and problematic about the Spartan system. And one of the things he identifies is Aristotle is very binary. he seems to see things as, good, bad, male, female, black, white, and so he's looking at the way that that the Spartan society has the genders separated in a way that they're operating independent of each other, and the result is that the community as a whole is less effective. The drag upon the Spartan system has in part to do with the trajectory of being a man in Spartan society is in a completely different direction from the trajectory of being a female. The Spartan way of living, this is actually a discussion that takes place. Herodotus is telling the story of the Persian Wars, and he's talking about the Persian king trying to get a grasp on the values of the Greeks. And so this is about the Persians not understanding the Greeks, and in particular not understanding the Spartans, because the Spartans have their own concept of law, and that law is the how it is to be a warrior. There is nothing else for them. For what is common to the Greeks is this idea of freedom, which the Persians don't understand in the first place. But the Spartans are a step beyond, and so from this perspective of Herodotus and Athenian, this is demarcating what it is that's important about the Greeks, and how the Greeks see the Spartans as apart and and different, so that for them to be separate. From the Greek perspective, it's even weirder from the standpoint of this is one of the reasons why, from Herodotus is talking about why it is the Persians are at a disadvantage despite their massive wealth and numbers, which we'll get to when we get to the Persian War. Herodotus is arguing they simply don't understand the concept of Greek freedom and how this is represented in the extreme by the Spartan dedication to the law of the warrior. The Great Retra, this is a bizarre document that is perplexing even to Plutarch, writing 8 centuries later. So there are a number of elements of this that are strange and opaque, that are difficult even for Plutarch to translate. There's arcane terminology, arcane aspects of familiar gods. So the thing about this is, it's a very ancient document, but it also plays into this idea that the Spartans are difficult to understand. Fundamentally, what we have is the Spartan as a whole acting as a single community with the advisement of their elders. And with this last aspect, if the people act in an unjust way, this can be set aside, probably added later. But what this represents to us is the sort of legendary mythological aspect of Spartan society being the creation of a law at the very beginning and not changing afterwards. The Spartan polity, this is a different way of talking about the Spartans from the standpoint of Xenophon. Aristotle is creating a critical comparative document. Xenophon is a Spartan enthusiast, and he's talking about everything that makes the Spartans what they are. And so he talks about the Aguegae, he talks about the barracks, he talks about the messes, he talks about their suppression of the Helots. He talks about all of these things that come together to bring about this amazing warrior culture that he thinks is so awesome. And so Xenophon is known for this. Xenophon is an Athenian who greatly admires the Spartan system because they are able to achieve this level of the ideal. The mixed constitution of the Spartan government, it does have 2 kings who are primarily there as military leaders. It has 5 men whose job it is to make sure the kings don't surpass their limitations. These are the ephors. And there is a council of old men, the Garausias. So the thing that they don't have is a high priest. One of the things that I talked about in the discussion is the fact that the Spartans don't have a huge emphasis on religion. You'd think that they would prize Ares and venerate him above all the other gods, but the truth is the Spartans don't want to give credit for their military acumen to a god. They want it for themselves. And the Spartans in general don't seem to emphasize religion to a great deal. Although, again, we don't know for sure because we can't hear the Spartans. We only know about them from the outside. And this plays into what is the Spartan mirage? The Spartan mirage is the tendency of outside observers to idealize the Spartans because we don't have the Spartan perspective itself. Most of what we know about the Spartans comes from the Athenians and other outsiders, and they tend to talk about how the Spartan society pursues this ideal and is remarkably stable and successful. Their culture has this level of simplicity and purity, which the Athenians, who live in a very complex and turbulent culture, envy. And so, Athens throughout the archaic and classical periods is undergoing this constant transformation, this constant mutation. Every generation, Athens is a different place, is constantly transforming. And through all of this, Sparta remains the same, remains durable, unchanging, this pinnacle of Greek achievement. In the specific idea of the Spartan vision of what it is to be an ideal Greek, which is the hoplite warrior. And so the Spartan mirage begins with Athenian idealization of the Spartans from the outside. This is picked up by modern historians, particularly the French during turbulent times around the Revolution, and by the English great masters of ancient literature through the industrial period in the 19th century. Both periods where, for those historians, everything is constantly changing. The world is different from the world of their fathers, coming out from underneath their feet at every moment, and no idea of what to expect. And so they can identify with the Athenian envy of the simplicity, purity, and durability of Spartan society. Of course, the thing about the Spartan mirage is that it tends to occlude the Spartan dependence upon the enslavement of the Helots in order to accomplish this purity. The fact that the Spartans create a society of equals by reducing citizenship down to a single class at the top of society and disenfranchise the skilled laborers, the perioikoi, and the helots, and are constantly engaged in the suppression of the people that make possible this lifestyle. So the Spartan mirage is just that. It is a mirage. But it talks to us about very important elements of Greek society, how the Athenians looked at the Spartans, and how the historians of the modern world have studied the Spartans, the Athenians, and other Greeks. All this to bear in mind as we study the Spartans and come to our own conclusions. We have to bear in mind the baggage that we bring to the study of these cultures and try to understand them instead from their own perspectives. And that's the end of the quiz. Please email me with any questions.